Hey everyone, welcome back to the Art of Living Well podcast. I'm like so excited to be here today. Look at what Stephanie and I are wearing right now.
Our
We are
red
wearing
hats.
our red hats because guess what? We got our medals. We did it. We climbed our Mount Everest, which was 29,029 feet well, it took us approximately 33 hours, a little less, maybe. Stephanie was a little bit ahead of me, but we ascended the mountain 15 times and it was amazing. And we are going to talk to you all about that today. And I'm taking this off now because I don't feel like wearing a hat.
Yeah.
But anyway,
We don't want hat head today.
yes. But before we talk about all of that, we just want to remind you guys that our 7-day vitality reboot, formerly known as the 7-day detox, is starting this Sunday. And we are super excited to have you join our community. And you can really revitalize so much of your life in these 7 days and getting really close to hitting the wall of signups unless you start later. So we just wanted to remind you to jump in the show notes or our Instagram or anywhere you can find us and sign up and join us.
Yeah. So where should we start, Marnie? So for a lot of you, we've talked about this a couple times. Like Marnie kind of gave the highlights of the stats, but we wanted to go through with you a little bit, like what we went through, like the actual event. And on the flip side, like just reflections and learnings and what we went through even emotionally and mentally, because I do think that's a huge part of this journey. And then really what we're taking away from this experience and how we're incorporating things into our life.
And I even just want to back up a little more because we signed up for this event last November and we heard about it like, I think you said May, like the previous May. And when I first heard about it, and I don't know how you felt, Stephanie, when Marc Hodulich, the CEO, came on our podcast, and my initial reaction was, there's no way I could ever do something like that. Like, wow, that's amazing, but it's not really me. And that seed was planted. This event seed was planted. And the more and more I thought about it, it was like, I have to do this.
Yeah.
And I think you were very similar, like, have to make this happen.
Yes.
And so here we are now today on the backside of the event, right?
Yeah.
And
And
what were those 3 days like for us in Mount Tremblant? Like, what was that like?
well, I mean, first of all, it's a super cute town. And I've been telling people this since. It's a European ski town in Montreal or outside of Montreal.
Very French.
So very French, very cute. And literally, as soon as you got there, like we ran into people in our hotel, in the lobby, and you kind of just knew the people that were doing this event, right? And there were like, what, 250 to 300 maybe?
Yeah. And I would say what it reminded me of is being on a very energized college campus where everyone's wearing the swag.
Yeah.
Like the whole town was taken over by 29,029 people wearing swag, and you could
Yes.
recognize each other. And we couldn't wait to get our swag on.
Exactly. Because there were quite a few alumni that were there. Over 50% of the participants had done at least one 29029 event before. So we were considered rookies. And there is just this like the people were genuinely so friendly and they wanted to share with you learnings that they had maybe from prior years if they'd done it before. There were a lot of volunteers. It's just this community that wants to give back and help each other out. And so for me, that was like the initial vibe. I mean, we met someone at dinner. We're like sitting there having dinner and there was a guy next to us and we figured out he was doing the event and we sat and chatted with him for like 20 or 30 minutes. So it was just this like, oh, the vibe and the energy and the buzz was like nothing else. Like there was not like a bad piece of energy in that entire town.
For the entire time we were
The entire
there.
time.
And I remember Marc saying on our podcast, and we'll reference the podcast number in the show notes, but I remember him saying, no assholes on the mountain.
Yeah.
And that is so true. Like there was not one nasty person that we met this entire time. Like Stephanie said, from the moment we checked in, there were people in line in front of us. There were people in line behind us, and everybody's chatting and everybody's excited and sharing tips and experiences. And I think at that point, we were the only newbies, right? Like we had met people that were repeats. So they were sharing some interesting ideas and It was so fun. And then when we finally did check in for the event, and we got our swag, and then we had an afternoon of welcome, sessions, coaching sessions, which, I was like, what else could they possibly tell us that they haven't told us in the last 10 months of coaching that we've had? And I learned so much in those sessions,
Yes.
and every single one. So that was pretty cool.
I mean, just how to hike up a steep part of a mountain, which we had to do 15 times because the last, I don't know, was it half mile or so, was like a 40+% grade.
0.7. I like looked at these stats again. The last 0.7 was a 42% grade.
Yeah, it was
crazy.
tough. But they taught us like different maneuvers. It's like this French step on how to go up. So you're using different muscles. So you're not like tiring out the same muscles over and over again if you were to just walk up normally as I would. And how to use poles more effectively, right? So yeah.
Yeah, like we shortened our poles, and that French sidestep was a lifesaver for me. I mean, I French sidestepped so much up the mountain, like truly, and who knew?
Yeah.
I did have a very sore butt afterwards, and I think it is from that, but
I'm sure.
It's all good.
Yes.
And even like the support that we both received from our family and friends going into this, I thought was amazing. Like, I did not expect the enthusiasm and excitement from my network. And I know I saw it coming from your networks too.
Yeah.
People were so excited to like hear about it and learn about it. And it felt so good going into this, even though I had, a nervous stomach going into it. Like, we spent an afternoon in Montreal, and we both were like, let's just get to the mountain. Like, it was hard to relax and enjoy Montreal because we knew what was coming.
Well, it's just that anticipation. I mean, I'm sure it's similar to any big endurance event, but because you're going to be spending 3 days with these people, having meals, it's not like just going to run a marathon and then go home. It's almost like going to camp. So when Marnie and I so we got some swag, and then there was, of course, like more swag that you could purchase. And I texted my family and I said, this is like my camp and like the hockey and lacrosse tournaments that my kids go to where they want the swag, right? And you're out of town and you're meeting people. I felt like that was that experience for me. And I went to camp once growing up, and I didn't do a lot of sports, which, will come about today when we kind of go through this a little bit, this conversation. But I felt like this was my moment. Like, and as a mom, you're doing that all the time for your kid and you're excited for them. And I was like, I'm buying some swag because I want to remember this. This was such a memorable and really profound experience for me. So it was
not only that, but when you talk about your camp experience, I did go to camp for many, many years, and the counselors were always like on this pedestal in my head. That's how the coaches were. And the voice of the mountain, Colleen, like we spotted her at our first breakfast, and we're like, oh my God,
it's
Colleen, and it's Brent, and it's all these people. And it's like,
and so just for reference, we would have calls a couple times a month with these coaches. So we felt like we knew them, but it wasn't on Zoom. Like we could see them.
And they don't know us.
No, but we knew their voices, and they were just as amazing as they were, for the last 20+ weeks as they were in person. And they have, 250 other people. Anyway, so.
And I just want to touch on the speakers really fast. Like, we had some motivating speakers that night before the event. And, Mark, the CEO, spoke, and Brent Pease, he has a foundation, the Brent Pease Foundation. He told a story that, brought tears to my eyes. We're not going to get into it right now, but so powerful and inspiring and motivating. And then Chris Hauth, the Olympian, and our Mindful
He's been
Mondays,
on our podcast too.
Yep. And our Mindful Mondays coach, he, talked about just having the grit to go out there and do it and scare your soul.
Scaring your soul was what I wanted to say. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was, he was like, just look at that fear straight in the eye and go through it.
Yes. And getting outside your comfort zone and how this will impact you after you leave the mountain, right?
Yep.
You're capable of so much more. And I think that's what this experience does for everyone. And then, of course, we have to talk about
Mr. Jesse Itzler.
because Marnie and I had, he had been to one other event. He's one of the original co-founders too. And we were hoping, fingers crossed, that he was going to be there. And one of the coaches dropped a hint. They mentioned the name Jesse early on.
And we were so
We're like,
excited.
oh my gosh, he's going to be here. And then he was, and he was there. And of course he gave an amazing speech also. And then afterwards, both of us wanted to meet him. And we had seen him in person one other time over the winter, but we didn't officially meet him. And she's like, I'm going over there. I don't know about you. And I'm like, okay, I followed along.
I kept saying to myself, he talks about stepping into your fear. I mean, did I feel a little uncomfortable going over there and tapping him on the back, which is what I did.
Well, and then but you tapped him on the back, but I was the one that was right behind him. So he turned around and thought it was me tapping him on the back.
But I was like, this is our moment. Like, if we don't meet him now, it's not happening during this time. Totally. And he said something during his speeches were also like profound and inspiring, but he kept saying, commit to the clock. And for me, like, that just resonated so much. I was like, okay, this is 36 hours. I am committing to 36 hours. Think of, I'm 51. I've had 51 years of life. 36 hours is nothing. I can do anything for 36 hours. Yeah. So that just kept resonating in my mind. And the other thing he said that also kept resonating in my mind during this whole thing was, at the end of the day, we have our legacies, right? We have our stories and our legacies. It's not about the material things that we have. It's about who we are as people. Yes. And that just encompassed this whole experience.
Right. And he also said, like, you can't find soul on a spreadsheet. You can't outsource it. Like, don't show up and half-ass it. And one thing that he said, he didn't say it specifically at that speech, but he said it in other times I've listened to him, is how you do one thing is how you do everything. And it's true, like, just the grit and determination. And, he gives silly examples, but if you're going to kind of half-ass, I don't even know, cleaning up your house or something simple like that, then is that how you want to show up? And is that how you want your legacy to be? Going back to your point, Marnie.
Yeah.
So
Stephanie, I'm curious, like, if you've thought about like what your goals were going into this event. Like, I know I had some set goals in my mind, and I'm guessing they're similar, but.
Yeah, I wanted to finish, and I knew for me, I had a couple injuries during the training that mentally kind of set me back a little bit. So I knew that if I could just be healthy on the mountain physically, that I would get through it. So in my mind, there really wasn't a question. Like, I was going to get the red hat. Ideally, I didn't want to be going up to like 5:59 p.m. because it ended at 6. So I wanted there not to be stressed,
right?
And it's stressful. So I wanted to finish with a few hours, and I met my goal. From that standpoint, I met my goal. And I think down deeper than that for me was this, I wanted to prove to myself that I am an athlete.
You are an athlete. I can attest to that.
And it's something I've kind of like been reflecting on quite a bit throughout the training. And I would visualize myself kind of going through the mountain and like just the end, like the last ascent, like getting that red hat. So for me, I really visualized that. And I do think it helped, but it was something deep down that my whole life, I'd had this like burning desire to be an athlete and considered one. And I was, directly, indirectly by various adults, coaches, gym teachers, whoever, other people in my life told that I wasn't good enough. I wasn't good enough for this team or that team. And I just realized the impact that actually has had over my life and my self-worth. And so for me, this was like a really big moment to be like, you can do this, you can do hard things. Like, you, not only are you an athlete, but you did this really long endurance event that not a lot of people do. So, I don't know, for me, this was a really big, like, emotionally, this was a big thing in addition to physically.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I think for me,
what about you?
So my goal, obviously my number one goal was to complete it and get the red hat. Yeah. And like you visualized it for months, just walking down that red carpet and getting the hat. But I also really wanted to have fun and stay present and look around, because I think that sometimes when you're so focused on a goal, all I could think about is the red hat, but really I was trying so hard, one foot in front of the other, one foot in front of the other, look around, stop, look at that beautiful town and the lake. And in the mud, slosh through that mud,
Right.
embrace the rain, embrace the disco gandhi. Like there were so many things. Thinking back now today, like I really was not thinking about things outside of this event. Like
Yeah.
I feel like I was so in it and so present. And if someone was talking to me, another hiker or participant, and telling me their story, I was like in it with them. And I just love that. And as a takeaway for me, like I need to get myself into that space on a daily basis because
Yeah.
that was such a good space for me to be in.
And I think it goes back to like the community because
Mm-hmm.
everyone was amazing. And like we'd find someone, especially that last 0.7 miles. If someone was talking to you, it made it go by so much faster. But you
Yes.
were like engaging. And the thing about hiking that I like versus like running, when people say when they run a marathon, like maybe you run with your person, your friend or whatever, and you talk a little bit when you're not out of breath, but like you could actually engage and have conversations with people. And we did. And so we met all these very like-minded individuals. And I guess it just goes back to like that feeling of community. And you're right, being present. I mean, we literally noticed like we swear over the 36 hours that certain leaves change different colors. Like it looked more
Yes,
green on one side and then it was more red and it was so pretty. Um,
totally. And
yeah.
there was
And
a waterfall, and we didn't even notice the waterfall for like the first three ascents. And
yes,
then we're like, oh my gosh, look at this
there's a waterfall.
waterfall.
Yeah. There was
Um,
like it didn't get boring because I think some people are like, oh my gosh, doing the same ascent
it did
15
not get
times,
boring.
it didn't get boring. And it was
Mm-mm.
kind of fun. Like I feel like there was like this childish play element of it when we were through the mud. Like I did I want it to be muddy the whole time? No, that probably would have been a little bit old, right? And pouring down rain. I was glad that it rained. I wanted there to be a little more adversity to this experience than there already was. And I wanted it to be a little muddy because I also feel like sometimes as my personality and a parent, like I just want everything to be kind of like, like not too
Now, to
many, not too just,
clarify, Stephanie would go around the mud as much as she could, and I would go through the mud singing Indiana Jones theme
yeah,
song some
yes,
of the time.
yes,
But then eventually I started to follow her around the mud. You really couldn't avoid the mud,
no,
but
yeah. You weren't
less
like
mud.
dry. It was just less mud, but
Yeah.
I kind of liked it. It was like, okay, here we're going through the bog again, like
Yeah.
there's something about this, like your inner child too, kind of coming out through this experience, kind of going back to the camp. And I was picturing my kids, they're talking about the bog at camp, like, oh, maybe this is what it's like, I don't know. So
Totally. Yeah.
yeah,
And
I,
I think just uncovering your own like grit, right? And determination.
mhm,
I felt like, so I didn't know what to expect. So
right,
after Ascent 1, I was like, I've got this. I knew that I was going to finish after Ascent 1.
yeah,
And I I think one of my challenges during this whole thing was, so I loved hiking with you, and I feel like we helped each other so much. Like I can't
absolutely.
even on
Yeah.
the ride down, and sometimes I would think for you and sometimes you would think for me, and
We were each
like
other's brains a few
it
times. Yeah.
was really amazing to do this with you. But you talk about the athlete thing. In my mind, you're like this super athlete, and I'm not as fast as you, and I'm not as strong as you. And so I had to work through that on my own while looking at your back probably 70% of the time because she was up ahead. But it really didn't matter because this wasn't a timed event. It was about finishing the event. And I had to keep telling myself, you go at your own speed. You're going to
Yes.
finish. Whether you finish 10 minutes later, 20 minutes later, it doesn't matter because you
No.
are still going to finish. I'm still strong. I like all of these things. And there was one ascent where Stephanie was hiking. It was ascent 14 where we started out with Coach Emilee, all three of us chatting. And I really would have loved to have chatted, but they were booking. And I was feeling like I could not keep up with them. And it was cold and it was rainy. And this was a really hard ascent for me. And they kept stopping and waiting for me, but then they were waiting for a while. And by the time I got to them, I needed a break and they were like ready to go. And so I kept telling them to just go because I was feeling pressure, like I needed to keep up with them. And I knew from my own mental state that I couldn't keep up with them. So for me, that was challenging. And then usually there's all kinds of people around. There was very few people. There were very few people around on that ascent. I'm not sure why. There was one guy who hiked with me for about 10 minutes to the aid station. And I told him that I was like really struggling. And he was like one of the people that would probably be lapping us. But he was on his last lap and he was like, listen, I have all the time in the world to get to the top. I'll hike with you to the aid station. And he chatted with me. I don't even know his name, but he was so kind and I was so thankful. And then I saw Stephanie at the aid station and she was kind of ready to go to the next one and I needed a break. So I was like, you go. And then that next 0.7, which was the 42% grade, the really, really tough stuff.
The highway to hell, as we called it.
The highway to hell. I just lost my shit and started crying. And I was like, I mean, I could cry now just remembering. I was like, I can do this. I can do this. I can do this. And I like have the tears streaming. And I get to the top and I see Coach Jen.
She was
and
awesome.
She just gives me this big hug. And she's like, you can do this. You've got this. You have one more. She's like, you have 5 hours to do your last ascent. She's like, so take all the time you need in the gear room and breathe and fuel. And then I saw Jordan and I started crying again. But then it was like, I was putting on my red tutu and I was excited because it was, I changed my shoes. I changed my socks. I went to the bathroom. I probably took 30 minutes because you were kind of waiting for me, which was really, really nice of you. And you did not need to do that. But I took the time I needed to regroup and I needed that regroup. And then the 15th ascent was not that hard. It was like, it just felt good.
And isn't it amazing that you can go from feeling like so down and defeated and like you're physically exhausted? We had 2.5 hours sleep, mind you. And we had been hiking for a good part of 30 hours. But you were able to mentally, like just with that pause and listen to your body, take the break, change your clothes, have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And
yes. Oh, right.
come on, you can't forget the peanut butter and jelly sandwiches on real bread, as my kids pointed out. And you were able to overcome that and dig down deep into your soul, right?
And I do think like anyone, the hug,
like
even the hug from, I mean, she's kind of a stranger, right? Like I don't know her well. And just the volunteers shaking the cowbells and telling me I've got this. And like, it's like, I knew I had it. I had to regroup.
Right. Well, we all go through periods of life on our journey on the mountain, off the mountain, where we're having a bad day, or we don't think we can do something, or the self-doubt kind of comes in. And it's like, to your point, pause, ask yourself, like, what do you need in the moment? And you did exactly what Marnie needed, not what someone else needed. And then all of a sudden you're in a better place, right?
Right. Yes, no. And, I think I really learned that you really can do anything you set your mind to. Like you can, you have to make the time and the space for it.
Exactly. And that was the other kind of, obviously it was a personal goal, but I also wanted to do this experience for my kids as a role model, as their mom, to show them exactly what you just said. If you want something, like you need a plan. You're not just going to fingers crossed, oh, I want to, run a marathon, whatever it is. It could be physical. It could be getting into a college. It could be anything. No, you have to work hard. And that's what I think both of us showed our children over the 20+ weeks prior. We had a plan. Both of us are type A and that's one thing I'm going to miss. Like, I kind of liked having this plan and we could be flexible with it and do your own thing, but it was like a loose plan of what we were going to do. And then there were challenges. Yeah.
Not to interrupt you,
okay.
But I was already like, well, I'm just going to start the plan again and go to tier 4. You could,
oh my God.
You could use the plan again if you wanted to in any way you want.
Right. Maybe not. Maybe I wouldn't do the 8-hour day again.
No, but like you could modify.
Yes. I agree. And I think that's a really good point. But just to show them, and we're both 50, I'm turned 50 this year. Marnie's a year older. And we can do hard things and we can do it at any age. And that maybe gets to my other thing I want to talk about was Jim. Because I do think we need to mention 81-year-old Jim.
Jim Fisher, right?
Yes.
So, yeah. Mm-hmm.
because we had heard about Jim. I think we knew there was an 81-year-old that was
Well, they
hiking
highlight him on their Instagram a lot
a
because
lot.
everybody's asked me about him. I'm like, we hiked with him. We met
Mhm,
him.
mhm. And he was an inspiration. He
Yeah.
was hiking by himself. We hiked with him for a good, I don't know, 10 minutes or so, probably.
Yeah. And then he was kind of done. Like he
Yeah.
knew that he couldn't talk anymore and he just needed to get into his rhythm.
Yes.
But he was so calm and
Mhm.
like I think he had hiked with various children, maybe
Well,
grandchildren.
he had three children, and he had done two other 29029 events before, and he had completed at least one of them. And his son, I think, had told him about it, but he wanted all three of his children there with him. So they weren't hiking with him necessarily, but they were all doing the event together.
And it was, I mean, he was chatting with us about Canada and about books and
Mhm.
life and, his wife who has done it also. She wasn't doing this event, but like just so cool. And I'm
Mhm.
like, oh my gosh, this guy's older than my parents. Like
Right.
crazy, right?
Yes.
Like, oh, what an inspiration to be doing this at 81.
What
And
an
then there was
inspiration.
also the 17-year-old boy who I can't remember his
Finish.
name, but he's like practically running up the mountain. I think
Yeah.
he finished number 2. And this is
Second.
not an event where you pay attention to
Mm-mm.
where people finish,
Times. No.
but it's kind of interesting. And that's why I'm pointing it out. I mean, I have an 18-year-old daughter. You have a 16-year-old daughter.
Yeah.
This kid's 17 and he is
Mhm.
doing this. Like, what is this kid going to be doing at 40?
I know.
It's unbelievable, right? Like to
Maybe he'll be a
learn
coach. Maybe he'll be one of the coaches for
just
this.
to learn these lessons at such a young age and to have
Mhm.
this experience, like, wow. I hope that my kids will do this with me someday. And
Yes.
it's kind of funny because Jordan going into this was like, I'm never going to do something like this. Never, never, never. No desire. Don't have time for training, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So I'm like, the other day, I was like, well, I hope I get to do it with the kids and you can crew us. And he's like, well, I don't know if I would do it to finish, but maybe I would do it and do like 10 ascents or,
Yeah.
I'd set a goal and do some ascents with you guys. And I was like, okay,
Yeah.
that's a step in the
That's
right direction, right? Like
absolutely.
his brain is slowly,
Hmm.
morphing into maybe I can do something like this.
Yes. Yes. And have you okay, so we're recording this on Thursday and we got back on Sunday. And it's been this kind of recovery week, if you will. So not doing much physically. But also just like there's a bit of a letdown, kind of like I'm sure when kids come back from camp or when you've had this amazing
Yes.
experience and then you're all like dispersed and you're like, I don't know if I'm ever going to see these people again. And we did meet some amazing people who we will bring on our podcast. So you will hear more on this topic at some point, I'm sure. But there is this bit of like a almost sadness.
Avoid.
It's a void. Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I'm still kind of processing through that right now.
Well, and I think, yeah, me too. I would say, and what I'm thinking about is, okay, I'm returned home. What's next? What
Yeah.
am I going to take from this experience, soak it in, and then what is the future going to look like for me? And people
Mhm.
keep asking me, I'm sure they're asking you, are you going to do it
Do
again?
it
And
again. Yeah.
when I first finished, I was like, I don't know. And now I'm kind of like Whistler might be calling my name.
Yeah.
It's a totally different beast, right?
Mhm.
Whistler's the hikes are 4 miles. That's,
Right.
even I think more planning is involved in trying to make that work. I
Right.
don't know though. That's
Yeah.
just in my head right now, and it wouldn't be anytime soon.
No. Yeah. But same here. But it's also like, well, what else could you do locally? It doesn't necessarily need to be
Right.
this big, huge event. But I do think, I don't know, pushing yourself outside your comfort zone is really important. And the learnings that you take away from these experiences are what like make you stronger. It forms your path, your journey, your legacy, right? Like back to what Jesse was saying and what you tell your children and grandchildren. So
And I do feel
yeah,
like I can do anything. Like
yeah,
I just have this like feeling like, oh my gosh, look at what I just
yes,
did. Like I can
yes,
do anything.
yep,
And, like you said, whether it's in business or your personal life or whatever it is, even just if you're going through adversity, just take one step in front of the other, baby
mhm,
steps. And we even talk about this in health and wellness, right? Like it's a journey and we're just taking small baby steps to make, the changes that you want to make in your life.
Well, and I think, would we have done this on our own? Would we have just like you and me or myself individually, like planned to go hike 15 times up a mountain by myself? No. So it's like the community that was built and established and trusted. We trusted the plan. We trusted the community. It's like anything else in life. If you want to do something and really get out of your comfort zone, maybe it's doing our 7-day vitality reboot and you've never done it before. Well, gee, doing it with people who have experience coaching others through it, who have done this hundreds of times before, who are there to support you every step of the way with questions. And then you have a community of other people to ask questions and rely on. That to me is huge.
The community.
It's the community.
And I remember doing my first, it was called detox then, and feeling it was hard.
Yeah.
It was hard. And I didn't have a big community around me. So when, now that we've created this community and done it a few times, things become easier. And it's easier to just make these changes because you get into a rhythm and a routine, and that your normal becomes a new normal. And then it becomes a new normal and you're feeling better and you're looking better and I'm bouncing out of my chair because I'm so hyper right now.
And she hasn't had the Coca-Cola that she had on the mountain just yet.
No, I did have some Coca-Cola on the mountain, but that's a whole other story.
Right.
But hold up your medal, Stephanie.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Just so proud. So proud.
Awesome. Yep.
And that's all we've got for today.
Yep. So anyway, sign up for our Vitality Reboot. Links are in the show notes, but you need to get on that ASAP when this episode drops because it's starting soon. And, for local people too, we still want to get back and do a little bit of local hiking, not maybe as many of a sense as we used to. So message us if you want to head out to Highlands or somewhere else in the Twin Cities area.
And we'll probably announce a group hike that we're going to be really excited about sometime this fall.
Yeah. So. All right.
Have a great day, everyone.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye.